these civilized people, they'll eat each other.
Dividing the ancient world into savage and civilized man is a highly speculative business for sure. Nonetheless, the Romans held that all animal species, including humans, spontaneously developed from materials of the earth. In fact, the English words matter and material are descended from the Latin word for mother. The earth is a mother, called Venus, who gave birth to humankind through spontaneous generation, according to the Roman author Lucretius. After being born as a species, humans must mature, just like an individual person does. In fact, mankind is a tool-making animal at all ages and stages of development. Hands, fingernails, and teeth were the earliest forms of weapons. The Romans believed that after these were discovered, stones, branches cut from trees, and fire and flame followed. Lucretius imagined a pre-technological human divided into two stages that was much tougher than modern men. In the initial phase, they roamed freely and lived lives akin to those of wild animals. The second stage involved the development of a family unit, a fire, clothing, and language. Meanwhile, in the early part of the year 1857, an ancient human skeleton was discovered in a limestone cave in the Neanderthal Valley, near Hochdal, between Düsseldorf and Elberfeld, Germany. The skull was also described in a paper titled, On the Crania of the Most Ancient Races of Man, by Professor Hermann Schaffhausen of Bonn, Germany in 1858. The brain size of the skull was measured in the laboratory and, according to the paper, the cavity held 16,876 grains of water. Thus, its cubical contents may be estimated at 57.64 inches, or 1,033.24 cubic centimeters. Estimated in dried millet seed, the contents equaled 31 Prussian ounces. Of the Neanderthal skull, the anthropologist wrote, quote, that the extraordinary form of the skull was due to a natural conformation, hitherto not known to exist, even in the most barbarous races of man. The human bones and cranium from the Neanderthal exceed all others in the peculiarities of conformation, which lead to the conclusion of their belonging to a barbarous and savage race. The Neanderthal cranium must have given the human visage an unusually savage aspect. This aspect might be termed brutal, inasmuch as the prominent supraorbital border is also characteristic of the facial conformation of the gorilla, unquote. He continued, these remarkable human remains belong to a period, antecedent to the time of the Celts and Germans, and were in all probability derived from one of the wild races of northwestern Europe. The Anthropological Museum of the Jardin des Plantes in Paris concluded that, quote, in the most ancient human crania, the occipital was the most developed, and the frontal region the least developed. The increase in the elevation of the latter marked the transition from barbarous to civilized man, and a marked prominence of the supraorbital region occurs most frequently in the crania of the barbarous races, unquote. The presence of savagery is not always evidence of a high antiquity, but of an early and barbarous state of man, according to early writers. Meanwhile, if you grew up in Europe or any former European colony, chances are that the definition of civilization you learned was that of Western civilization. But what exactly constitutes a civilization? By mainstream definitions, a civilization is a society with 7 features including a stable food supply, social structure, system of government, religious system, highly developed culture, advanced technology, and a highly developed written language. However, if we accept all of these as absolute requirements, many civilizations should be struck from the list. I think we can agree that even small tribes have religion, culture, technology, social structure, a stable food supply, and language. In fact, many societies traditionally accepted as civilizations actually lack one or more of these traits. Yet this is far from the full story of humanity. All over the world, since long before the beginnings of written history, people have explored their surroundings, devised technologies, built societies, sought knowledge, and recorded their own histories. That is to say, they produced civilizations. But even if they are eventually admitted into the civilization club, why require such specific traits as the basis for a general dividing line between civilizations and primitive cultures? In fact, to imply that a culture lacks civilization is to imply that they are uncivilized, which is another way of saying that they are barbarians and savages. Neanderthals had a sophisticated culture in prehistoric Europe, according to the evidence. despite the fact that they did not act like early modern humans of the same era. Between 400,000 and 40,000 years ago, they inhabited most of Europe and parts of Asia. They were skilled hunters of enormous Ice Age animals. According to research, they made their own tools, buried their dead, possibly took care of the ill, and even used language to communicate. From present-day England roughly east to Uzbekistan and south nearly to the Red Sea, Neanderthals lived in a large area. They lived during times when glacier repeatedly advanced and receded, but the Neanderthals evolved. They relied increasingly heavily on huge, hoofed animals for food when the glacier pushed in and edible vegetation became scarcer, hunting the reindeer and wild horses that grazed the steppes and tundra. Despite their image as uncivilized cavemen, Neanderthals were actually highly skilled and intellectual people. No, these weren't ape men. Therefore, it is unfair to them that the term Neanderthal is now derogatory. In fact, up to 125,000 years ago, Neanderthals purposefully altered the landscape. More than 100,000 years ago, Neanderthal hunter-gatherers in Germany removed vast swaths of lakefront woodland during a thaw between two ice ages, a process known as gardening. Until recently, it was widely believed that people didn't start modifying their environment until they began cultivating crops, some 10,000 years ago. For example, they would cut down trees to make fields. But some archaeologists think this began much earlier and on a smaller scale. Neanderthals were expert tool builders, as shown by the flint handaxes and spears that have been discovered during excavation. The levalloy method, an advanced stone technology invented by Neanderthals over 300,000 years ago. This required creating pre-shaped stone cores that could subsequently be refined into a finished tool. It implied that Neanderthals were free to move far from the sources of raw materials while yet having the capacity to create tools when required. Chemical examinations of ancient bones reveal hints about various Neanderthal lifestyles and demonstrate that the species consumed meat. Cannibalism has been shown by microscopic investigations. Fossilized deer and Neanderthal bones discovered at the same site have identical scrape marks, suggesting that the same tool was used to take the muscle from both animals. Neanderthals are often associated with cavemen since so many of their fossils and artifacts have been discovered there. Meanwhile, numerous early modern people also resided in caves. Among the most well-known instances is the original Cro-Magnon man, who was discovered in France. I think we can all agree that they lack traditional civilization. The lack of concrete proof of representational art from Neanderthal sites is disappointing. But they did make jewelry and displayed some symbolism. It appears that some of this jewelry was made from eagle talons. The oldest specimens date back roughly 130,000 years. At Neanderthal sites, including those in France, pierced animal teeth and crafted ivory have also been discovered. Additionally, pigment was apparently employed by Neanderthals to beautify or conceal their bodies. The majority of paleoanthropologists concur that Neanderthals often lived in groups of 10 to 15 people, including children. This conclusion is supported by a few pieces of evidence, such as the scant number of burial site remnants and the small size of rock shelters. However, recently discovered footprints indicate they live in much larger groups of up to 30, with many children. Neanderthals were top predators as well, and some top predators live in small packs, like lions and wolves. Hunting and butchering of gigantic elephants also indicates that Neanderthals lived in much larger groups than previously estimated, or had more coordination between different groups than previously believed. In the meantime, Denisovans produced amazing jewelry, which suggests an organized civilization. Jewelry reveals a person's rank and perhaps that there was some kind of order and leadership. An extinct species or subspecies of archaic humans who lived in Asia during the Lower and Middle Paleolithic are known as the Denisovans, or Denisova hominins. Few physical remains have been found for Denisovans, thus DNA evidence makes up the majority of what is known about them. The findings suggested that the Denisovan bones came from a time when temperatures were comparable to those of today, in a region that was suitable for human habitation because of its abundance of broadleaf woods and open steppe. DNA tests have revealed that a Denisovan branch lived in Papua New Guinea, proving that they were the ones to invent the watercraft. One of the first agricultural hubs ever established in the globe is located in the highlands of New Guinea. Could Denisovans have also engaged in a primitive type of agriculture and transmitted it to current humans? The researchers discovered surviving Denisovan DNA in modern humans by analyzing the genomes of 161 people from Indonesia and Papua New Guinea. The research team claims to have discovered compelling evidence that the so-called Denisovans may have actually been three separate lineages of prehistoric people that traveled from Siberia to Southeast Asia. In the DNA of people in Indonesia and Papua New Guinea, they discovered the signatures of two distinct Denisovan groups. Both were distinct from the Siberian Denisovans. One of those groups may have been a distinct species because it differed from Denisovans and Neanderthals in appearance. We should probably give this other group who lived in Papua New Guinea a different name if we're going to refer to Neanderthals and Denisovans by a distinctive name, which we do. The reason and circumstances surrounding the extinction of the Denisovans remain unknown. Between 40,000 and 50,000 years ago, increasing populations of Homo sapiens put Denisovans in a resource-constrained environment. This caused Denisovans to go extinct. But they continued to exist in Papua until between 15,000 and 20,000 years ago. In terms of intelligence, culture, technology, and hominin interbreeding events, we need to re-evaluate the very foundations of the human origin story. Could it be that a paradigm shift is already taking place during our lifetimes? Homo sapiens may have diverged from a band of Homo erectus 800,000 years ago, according to new studies on human DNA. Considering this, there's a chance that as Homo erectus was traveling the old world, a handful of them made their way to Java and did something radically different, like build the boat, and that's where early Homo sapiens evolved before spreading back to the rest of the world, eventually giving rise to the Neanderthals and Denisovans and modern humans. In fact, this event could be the dividing line between savage and civilized man. It is all a matter of how you draw up the human evolutionary tree and label the branches. Names are just names, but I think many of us would agree that Neanderthals, Denisovans, and early Homo sapiens should all be under the same umbrella species. Could civilization actually extend all the way back to this time as well? It all depends on your definition of the word, but as we have seen, dividing the ancient world into savage or barbarous man and civilized man is a highly speculative business.